Hi, and welcome to the OpenCrowbar Community Planning Meeting of September the 10th, 2014. We're just finishing up putting our agenda together and planning our next 2 weeks of work. Should we put Mikey's docs update up at the top of the agenda? Looks like that's what's happening. Whoever's got the background noise, could you please mute? Mikey, would you be ready to just talk about where you are and maybe, I don't know, if you want, if you can, show a little something, how folks could help you out?
Not much to show, but I can tell you, I can describe what the plan is, which I think needs to be vetted with everybody. So the current mechanism is I had pulled the docs out of the repo, kind of run them through some pre-processing to convert them to restructured text, run them through Sphinx, they end up on readthedocs.org. So it's really running a script to do the conversion, kind of pushing them out to read the docs. That worked reasonably well. My plan for the actual code will be to go into Crowbar and convert the documentation, do a one-time conversion of the documentation from Markdown to restructured text within the current repro. So that'll be step one. Most of that happens with the pandoc process, but there'll be some cleanup needed. So I will do that. I will then go into Crowbar and update the doc view or the help view. I'm actually not sure if it's called doc or help. There are links to both. But my plan is to update that view to render HTML documentation if it exists, mainly in developer mode. But if not, to just ignore it and include a link back to readthedocs.org. And then the third part of this is in the tree, there will be a makefile that will run the Sphinx restructured text mechanism to generate the actual HTML docs locally in the tree. When I say in the tree.
We could make that part of the Travis process eventually. But...
Yeah. Because we can set up read the docs so it triggers off a check-in. It triggers off a merge into Git, so it will rebuild docs for us on the read the docs site. Awesome. But when we do the conversion, we can also have local docs in the tree. And it's pretty easy for me to just remove the view and point everything to read the docs. The reason for having some way of building the docs locally as well is from a developer or an author point of view, if you have a Crowbar install, you can update the docs, you can type make, you can make sure you got all the formatting straight before you do a commit.
Right, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah, and I think the trickiest part here is, from a testing perspective, I think the trickiest part is going to be making sure I get the database migrations right, because we're dropping at least one table in the database, if not more.
Since this is primarily a Ruby project, there's I think it's rdoc.org that I found incredibly useful in the stuff I'm doing. The rdoc.info, actually. Have you tried that out?
I've actually started some work on using Yard to try to annotate the source code to automatically generate developer documentation.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting. I've done the equivalent.
And that we can actually use tags to automatically generate API documentation that looks kind of sane.
Mm-hmm. And I've done something similar in the past on a Python documentation project, and it worked really well. I'm all in favor of generating docs from source code, whether it's Yard or Ruby docs. I still think we need written kind of user and developer documentation that's more prose, but it's really nice to have links directly to docs generated from the code. I almost think that's a separate issue, though. For the current one, I'm trying to get the core docs converted over to the point where they render in kind of HTML in a pretty clean manner. Then we'll come back and we can start thinking about generating docs from source code.
Yeah, what you've done so far was actually really helpful to me. Google's picking up those results and actually rating them on par or higher than the GitHub results. Okay. And they're definitely a lot easier to navigate.
Yeah, they're easier to navigate, and one of the things that can happen when we switch formats is restructured text actually gives you a little more formatting control. The problem with Markdown isn't the markup as much as the many flavors of the markup, including the latest, standard Markdown flap that happened a week ago. But to me, my real complaint with Markdown is it's pretty much meant to be an alternative to HTML. Restructured text is meant to be a markup that can be rendered into multiple formats. So we get things like PDFs and EPUBs effectively for free, which is nice.
Very nice. Victor, would you be bringing the Yard gems into Crowbar?
I'd be bringing it into the development environment and not really into Crowbar proper. Like, it wouldn't be part of the bundle that we use to pull in the gems that Crowbar itself needs, but it would be part of the admin container.
Well, not part of our release asset.
Sorry?
Would that would just a synonym for that be Yard won't be a part of our release assets, but definitely part of our admin Docker container.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, that's the approach that I've been taking is pretty much is to have Yard available and then just set up some sort of post-commit hook that will rerun Yard to regenerate the developer documentation on a Git push.
Cool. That's nice. So we've got one full effort from Mikey for end user, administrator type of documentation. That does overlap a bit with the developer output documentation, but then we've had Victor focused hard on the developer documentation. Cool. Anything else in Doc's world? This pad that I'm sharing went dead last week when my colo was rooted and they were using me for an open proxy for like a month. And I've moved everything without any data loss, plus an upgrade to the OS and the Etherpad software to the colo over at netaccess.net. And it should survive pretty well there. I've created upstart scripts that'll respawn it. So the pad should be more reliable now. Unless, of course, the hardware goes.
Good.
Is anybody making copies of the pad contents? I could script it to automate backing up to somewhere.
I do download them every once in a while. I haven't done it for a little while. Yeah, at some point, we've been putting these minutes into GitHub as part of the history, which is handy. I don't, they end up not being in docs, but they end up being in the project wiki, which I think is more searchable and more durable than doing them just in pads.
Yeah, right now Etherpad's not seen by Google, as far as I can tell.
Right. So why don't we do this? Why don't we export them and then dump them into a meetings in the Crowbar? There should be a Crowbar Wiki project. Pretty sure there is. Wiki.
And I'm going to have to drop, but just wanted to get in here for the beginning of the meeting. So
Thanks for joining.
when I start working on this stuff, I'll drop out an email to let everybody know it's coming.
Yeah, Crowbar Wiki would be perfect for this because it's just a GitHub. You can check it out. Then yep, and then from there just dump those files in.
Yeah, I'll see what I can do about automating the Etherpad to here, or at least link the Etherpad here.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Next on the agenda is the issues review. The Wacky was at the top of the list again with the markdown. So anybody want to speak out and take any of these issues head on? Stuff I've been dealing with is in a different repo.
So the convert UI page refresh to Ajax. I was supposed to get Meshiest into the.
Rob, you faded to nothingness.
I faded out. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
I'll boost the
You
mic.
sort of sounded like a dying Darth Vader, but now you're better.
I faced away from the microphone. It's a fairly directional mic. It's the only downside on this mic. So I need to get Meshiest in the team page and then assign him some work. So let me start taking care of that. And so we should see some progress on that in the next sprint. I'll make sure that happens with him. He just needs some help. This is actually a bug. I'm not sure I'm going to have time for it, but I might ask. I'll see if Meshiest will look at it. It's exactly up his alley. Victor, can you speak to the 10 gig NIC patterns?
Oh yeah. Pretty much, we just need to make the default conduit in the production.sh accept upgrades to using 10 gig NICs if there aren't any 1 gig NICs to run the admin network over the top of.
Okay. Would you consider that a bug or a feature?
It's a request from a user.
So it's an enhancement?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, I'm not signed in. Can't change that.
RPM install doc references for Dell. I thought that got closed.
That should be closed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I accepted
the pull request is
I
accepted.
accepted that pull.
Done.
I thought I accepted that pull like last week.
And RPM install fails. Is there also a poll that addresses that?
I don't know.
I doubt it.
All right. That's one of the ones for you to take a look at in time.
What's that?
The RPM install.
Oh yeah. Okay.
I know you can. 52. Okay. Readystate Wizard does not add network to deployment. That's the bug. That's going to be me. And Readystate Wizard does not work for Docker nodes. I just need to sit down and get back into the code. Great repo. So I'll get that in for the next sprint. I think I can commit to that. Yeah. Let's see. And then, so I'll hold until we get that done. I'm going to hold off on the Readystate, accepting the Readystate story. I'm not going to have. I'm not doing a good job doing this. I'm going to ask if Greg can look at that. So I'm going to assign it to him. If he'll play with that. Icehouse upstreams. We'll talk about that in the versus cobbler piece. I think we've got some active interest around that. We'll look there.
Well, back to 195. Are we interested in supporting this minimal install of CentOS?
195. Where are you pointing at?
Issue 195. It's open. Missing create repo dependency with RPM install. It's assigned to Victor, but
I'm only interested in supporting that if he posts a patch. Otherwise, no, I'm not really interested in just supporting the minimal install.
Okay. So let me comment on this, and then.
I got it.
Are you adding a comment? Oh, good.
I did.
Good. Sorry, I'm not watching. I'm watching my screen, not yours.
Sharing is caring.
Oh, no,
I hate that expression. I don't care.
Sharing is communist.
Good. All right. So that makes sense. See what the next issue is. So I think the Icehouse upstreams are something that I'm having discussions off list about, and let's move that to the agenda. It's a perennial agenda item, but I think we should move it to the agenda. So I'll add it.
Which one? The Icehouse?
Yeah, I'm updating the agenda. I got it.
Okay.
Okay. Next issue.
Other stories we need to clean up? Or we'll keep on with the issues. 153 hardware workload with Sledgehammer for Open Compute and C series. Not assigned to anybody.
Yeah, I believe Victor's actually actively working this. Is that a fair statement, Victor?
Yes. For the raid stuff, that be the case. BIOS stuff, I don't plan on doing immediately due to needing to work on the R series stuff first. And with R series, I have to do it out of band.
Okay, so this is one of those places we should potentially move this down. So Randy and I were going to need to create some intermediate milestones, and that was one of our tasks.
Well, one of those intermediate milestones would have to be get some C-series boxes.
Yeah. Or something besides this, besides these. You're entirely right. Right. All right, let's keep going. I actually know what I want to discuss for that. It's already on the agenda. So.
Hadoop's the Readystate prep. We don't have anybody assigned to that.
No. So these are basically these are
longer stretches.
Yeah, they're blocked. Actually, I would consider them. This one's blocked because we don't have the hardware. Sorry, the hardware workload within Sledgehammer is blocked because we don't have the hardware. And what we probably want to do is when Randy and I clean this up, I think we're going to push things out to other milestones. We'll talk about a milestone.
Well, the RAID part of that should just work, because the RAID stuff that I've written is actually doesn't care what system it runs on. All it cares about is what RAID controllers are in the system.
Right. It's actually a pretty specific set of activity with this. Inside of that story. But I think that this is blocked, so we need to look at how we want to deal with that. You're dealing with the prereqs, which we want to track, but we're not doing it specifically to check down those prereqs.
Right.
Add missing documentation areas. Okay. I'm going to need help on the missing documentation areas, just to capture some. It's really going through an install and capturing the screenshots and making sure that things look right.
Mm-hmm.
And Bootstrap UI not updated for API workflow. This should be closed because it's done. Somebody just needs to validate it. But I did do this work. There might be bugs in it. That's why it's still hanging out.
I'd love to test it. I don't quite understand what additional steps I'd be seeing.
So what happened when we switched our workflow to attributes? So in April, May, we started using attributes in a much more prescriptive way. And the Bootstrap screen had to actually set attributes for roles, not just role assignments. And so I made those changes so that you'd set the attributes you wanted to set on the screen as part of the Bootstrap process. So what you have to do is you have to start Crowbar without going through all the Bootstrap steps in the automated script. Ideally you either modify the production.sh or use production.sh with the -zombies zombie flag. And then that would let you go into the bootstrapping screen, which I can never say because of the tongue twister. That in that screen, you actually would be able to review the deployment before it starts annealing. Right. The challenge is if we're using the production.sh script, it automatically anneals. and so you don't get a chance to make modifications. If you pass in -zombie into Bootstrap into the production.sh, it will not turn the admin node alive. That's why it's called zombie. Maybe we need to rename the flag, but
No.
so what it does is
We just
it
have to
sets up
popularize alive.
It does everything except give it life. Maybe we should call it Pinocchio. But that lets you work the Bootstrap screen.
Okay. Great, understood. I can check that out. I'll grab it.
Cool.
All right, that's all the issues. That's all the open issues. Back to the agenda, if there's nothing else. I had clean up GitHub stories, but I think that's basically what we just did, no?
Yeah, that's exactly what we did.
So I've made a whole bunch of progress with Chef Metal Crowbar. It's in my repo. It's allocating nodes, bringing them from the system deployment into a ready deployment. And I'm about to set up the work of ensuring that all the node roles implicit in the ready deployment to be a Crowbar managed node actually get executed, and then set the available flag to false, and letting them stay in whatever they really want to call this deployment, but the default is called ready.
The deployment.
What do you think of that? Yeah, we had discussed this on the design call last week, and I neglected to review what we said. But I was moving from however many nodes you want from the system deployment into a ready deployment. That gives, I think, people who are kicking the tires the fastest possible demonstration of Crowbar glory.
I like that you're reinforcing the ready state terminology in that, and that makes sense to me.
Yeah, Crowbar got it ready for them to run whatever Chef or whatever stuff they want to run on it.
Does that line up with what Chef Metal calls it?
Yes. A server is ready to Chef Metal when Chef Client is installed on it.
Okay.
So for the first pass, do we care about the fact that the Chef client on that node is going to be configured to talk to our Chef server and not someone else's?
Yeah, the next step would be to change that based on the Chef server, if any, that they push in through the Chef Metal recipe.
Okay.
So I guess I will need a node role or something to change the Chef server.
Node role to change, yeah. Oh, to actually change the Chef Metal.
To change the configuration of the node to point to a different Chef server.
Right.
This is the notion of a ready machine. Warm and connectable. Warm and connectable. That sounds like a nice person you want to know. And I guess if it's warm and connectable, then it will install Chef Client on it. If it deems necessary. I haven't gotten there yet. I want to. This is exactly where I'm at, to see if the machine object that gets created down here, it uses whatever particular transport, whether it's SSH or some Windows something, and then and it'll get the Chef client on it if it needs to. I'll see how smart Chef Metal is about that. But I assume we're going to need something to tell Crowbar to change the Chef server. I'm not sure. Maybe Chef Metal will change the Chef client config to be what it wants. One way or another, I'll get around with it. I'll get through it. And that's it. The code's in my repo.
Cool. Is that something we can? What you think we'll be able to do demos with next sprint?
Yeah.
Okay.
Things start getting hairy for me next week. I'm going to be out of town at some conferences for the end of next week and the following week. But
I think this is a little behind.
What?
Your last commits were 2 months ago.
Oh,
yeah, I'm pushing into this. Why isn't this receiving? Where am I pushing to?
Are you on a branch?
I'm definitely pushing.
Yeah, you might be on a
It's pushing too. Here, 15 hours ago. Yesterday evening, I did a push.
Are you on a branch other than master?
Oh, I'm on a branch. Yeah, I'm on a branch. I'm on Lookup API working progress. There I am.
Right, that makes sense.
That's the work.
Cool.
Here's the code. I'd like to take this out and on a design call work through this to create a proper API, a proper client library, a proper Crowbar Ruby gem, to make things like proposed deployments and bring this out to the community, say what we want in this Ruby API, what we want it to do.
So you balked at trying to copy the stuff that I have in the Crowbar CLI?
Yeah, I could get so much done so much faster with HTTP Party. Balking is a strong word. I'd say wanted more fun. And yeah, this can parallelize and it handles a lot of stuff. And it has no other dependencies, and it automatically does JSON. So here, this is all you need to dump, everything that's going on at the standard error and to expect all transactions in JSON. And this is how you set up digest off. That's it. And then every following, and that's how you set up the base URI and everything. It really makes life a lot easier. For me, at least.
We ought to move on and talk about Chef, Salt, and then we can talk about the Icehouse Crowbar pieces. But before that, I want to talk about, very briefly talk about the sprint boundaries in our backlog. So in order for us to plan more effectively and not review stuff that's not getting worked, what I would suggest we do is start naming some of these these intermediate milestones for Broom, and work towards a naming convention. So Broom with a date. People be all right with that? I guess it would be a 0910 Broom.90910 for this past sprint, use the date, so it would be 0928 or 0924 for the next milestone sprint, and put things into that milestone that we think are there. That way we'd be able to look, did we finish this sprint or not? And then we'd still have Broom as a generalized release, and just do a broom.x for the things that are we have committed in here or not, and then we can use tee up the next release milestone and push things that we're not even started on, like the Hadoop work, into that. So use C. I think we considered calling Clawhammer, or there was a suggestion for C, Clamp. Does that sound reasonable? That people? I'm looking at Scott too. So.
Yeah, so what you're suggesting is that the sprint name is the release that you're currently on and the ending date of the...
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. That's
okay. I mean, we could do it atomically increasing, but...
Yeah, what was going through my head is it sounds like we're messing around trying to deal with the tool and to try to track what we want to track. And then maybe it's...
So why don't we just, since we already have Broom.1, why don't I just do atomically increasing?
Yeah.
And then we'll just, because we're a little squishy on sprint boundaries, it might make more sense to have a month-long sprint for that. So I don't want us to try and get into formal sprint planning with estimates yet. What I'd rather us do is say, look, these are the things that we think are coming. These are the things we think are farther in the future. I want to stop turning on things. I hate feeling bad that we didn't do Hadoop work when we know we're not doing Hadoop work. So. I'll connect with Randy. We'll start doing this convention of adding the next milestones in the release, push out the things that aren't in that, and then we can review them more systemically like that. Do it like we could actually do a sprint release review. Yeah. Sorry, a release review.
I actually like the atomic numbers added to the name, because what that does is it shows us when we finally commit how many work were done very easily.
It handles the year wrap also.
Yes, certainly.
Okay.
Cool. I guess we settled on it then.
Yeah, unless anybody else has any other questions. I mean, I don't know how much you care about the name convention. The main thing is that what we've been doing is setting up a series of milestones in Git and pulling our work into those milestones.
That's the main thing. And I do think we're going to need a name for the C release. I proposed one, unless somebody objects to whatever it was. It's in the roadmap. Hold on, I'll look it up and tell us what it is. I don't have it in the search history.
I don't have it on the what I would want.
We've got ambient noise coming through that we may not want recorded.
Yeah, we'll throw in the name of the All right, next agenda item. Sorry.
Yeah, it's salt. I want to talk about salt stack.
Sure. I'll proxy for Greg and Victor. If you have items, you can correct me. So, I did a preliminary salt integration. He did more than we had originally talked about, because originally we were just trying to get the minions to connect into an existing salt server. Greg's work was actually setting up a salt server and then automatically connecting the minions to that. I know that we got some feedback from Victor that it didn't follow all the conventions, and Greg was adjusting that. But the basics are in there for the salt work, and we're looking for the prototype customer person using it to sort of say, all right, this works for me. You know, we actually want to start you know, it's ready for use. Greg took it on because we think we have somebody to do that, but if there's other people in the community that want to engage with salt, we're at the right point to do that. So I probably can leave it there.
So what you're basically looking for is a QA cycle.
Exactly right. We're looking for a QA cycle.
We have rewritten.
Victor, I think you need to mute. Somebody's getting a lot of line noise. Thank you.
That's a good question. So let's take that as an action item to write a scope down. I thought I did, but we need to review the scope.
Effectively,
it actually needs to go in the GitHub backlog.
It does, and Greg needs to update it with how he wants the system tested. We should get somebody to validate it, whether it's the end user or someone on this team. It doesn't matter to me. And then if we're good for it, then we'll call it a feature and leave it there. If it suits the criteria, I'm not sure what the criteria was.
No, that makes sense. I know we wrote it down, but it's. Okay, I'm just adding a story. The story is number something.
So the sprint, we should plan to get that tested.
221.
If we think it's done, right? If we think it's development complete, then we'll move it into QA.
Oh, okay. Bye. All right, so let me go in and talk through the next piece. All right. So I'm not ready to do the versus cobbler yet. Let's talk about Icehouse. So one of the challenges with Icehouse is there's a pretty big matrix of options here. So right, we have Ubuntu versus CentOS versus Red Hat versus SUSE. And so the Red Hat stuff is usually their enterprise OSP, CentOS is RDO. And then the problem is we also have, the matrix includes Chef versus Puppet versus Salt. And so there's the top interest, as far as I can see, is basically the CentOS RDO pack stack, which is Puppet. Mix. That's the second. So interest actually ranked in. I'll do this as ranked interest. And then the next down seems to be Ubuntu plus Chef or Salt. And I don't know if there's anything else under that.
I've seen actually a little Ansible.
With what? With which OS?
Ubuntu.
Okay. A lot of times the Ansible stuff I've seen has actually been kicking off Salt or Chef.
Yeah.
So in that case, I actually consider that a competitive, from a Crowbar perspective, a competitive deployment. because that's Ansible in that case is doing what Chef would do. That's going to get into our versus cobbler conversation. The thing that we just have to note is that SUSE. So I think SUSE's cookbooks on CV1 are better than the community ones. The community ones appear a little bit stuck. I'm sorry, Chef people, if you're listening, but they seem like they're not making as much progress, and the SUSE team on Crowbar 1 has really been making a lot of progress on those Chef cookbooks. The problem is they only are being supported for Crowbar 1 SUSE pretty narrowly. They're not very generic. So it would be a pretty big lift. So let me do it this way. It's a smaller lift for CentOS support. Dell has been doing that up until April. It's a big lift for Ubuntu support. Just historically, there's enough difference between those operating systems. If SUSE is not maintaining it, it's going to take time to fix it. And so, with the work we've been doing in OpenCrowbar, I believe that the smallest effort, and we need to validate this, is going to be the RDO plus PackStack. Approach. Doing the other, and I think PackStack has Ubuntu support, I just don't know how good it is, because it's not the way I hear people doing the deployment. I think that it would be great to have SUSE, the second option is to have the SUSE CB1 cookbooks. The SUSE cookbooks versus ported to OCD. And CentOS, which I think would be should be a little bit bigger lift. The cookbooks are much more sophisticated. And Ceph needs to be a factor in any of these sessions. So I don't have, we're almost out of time. I don't have a big recommendation here, but I'm hoping that we're going to find some consensus in the community about what approach to take. Okay. I'll keep collecting data. I just wanted to get that documented. I did send out this versus cobbler component, and my thinking on it, I'd love to see some response on the mailing list, is that we're going to need to describe the value of Crowbar's added complexity against Cobbler. I think it would be very hard to say that you're as simple as Cobbler, because the things that make it simpler are the very things that limit its function. So, lack of DNS integration. And at some point, Victor, you should talk about. We should get you to talk about the console DNS concepts. But the lack of DNS integration, the lack of IP assignment, the lack and Chef, and then the lack of actually handing off to Chef, Puppet, or Salt are all things that I think make Cobbler less attractive. It's why Razor's been able to get a beachhead in that. And we just need to do a better job of showing people how to do those simple tasks. And I think that'll make Cobbler less attractive. I think we also need to have an easy way to show people how to onboard for the very simple workloads. So there's definitely things for Crowbar to do. And the Readystate screen is probably part of that story. So. So we actually need some demos of the Readystate screen. and that I have to finish in order to do the demos. Let's see if we can. Am I available next Wednesday? I think I am. I'll commit to a demo of the Readystate screen next Wednesday, and to do a live demo for that. I think I can pull that off. It may take a little.
Well, I'm writing it down.
Good. And that takes. So I hope that's coherent. I'm sort of dumping a whole bunch of information about generalized trends that I've been collecting, but it's worth getting it noted so people are aware of things I'm hearing, and if there's concerns or people want to challenge it, they should just let me know.
Awesome.
Actually, what I'll do is if anybody besides the people who are live on this call hears this statement, I will buy you a nice dinner. Somebody's listening to the recording enough. I use secret code. Rob buys dinner. First person to use that secret code, I will buy dinner for. Always worth giving people an incentive to listen to the end of a recording.
Oh yeah, we'll start every recording with there'll be a secret code somewhere in this.
You know, I like this idea. We should do that.
Somewhere, anywhere, we can say it any time in this talk.
That's true, and we can start giving away Crowbar merch. I'll put together a budget for that. I like this idea.
You're an advertising man at heart. All right, so that looks like all of our agenda, and it's the top of the hour. So if nobody has anything else, I'll close this down, and thanks for listening through and sticking with us through this Open Crowbar planning meeting. And we look forward to the design meeting where we get to demo a whole bunch of new stuff that we've been working on the past 2-3 weeks.
Thanks, Jed.
All right.
Good job.
Have a great week.